The MH-47 Chinook carved through the blizzard like a wounded bird fighting against death itself. Twin rotors churned snowflakes into horizontal sheets of white, each blade rotation a desperate heartbeat against the fury of the Hindu Kush Mountains. Inside the cargo bay, 12 operators from SEAL Team 7 sat in disciplined silence, their faces hidden behind balaclavas and night vision mounts. Breath formed clouds in the frigid air. The temperature gauge read -18°C, but with wind chill factored in, it felt closer to -30. Christmas Eve, 2024. While families across America gathered around decorated trees and children dreamed of presents, these men prepared for something far removed from holiday cheer. They prepared for war. Commander Jack Thornton pressed his gloved finger against the tactical display, tracing the insertion point with the precision of a man who had done this 100 times before. 58 years old, 30 years in special operations, more missions than he cared to count. His face bore the map of those decades, deep lines carved by desert sun and mountain wind, eyes that had seen too much yet remained sharp as surgical steel. The mission brief had been clear. Extract Ambassador Richard Harmon from a Taliban compound deep in these godforsaken peaks. Intelligence suggested 15 to 20 hostiles. A straightforward snatch and grab operation, relatively speaking. The thermal imaging told a different story entirely. Lieutenant Parker leaned forward, his voice crackling through the internal comms. "Sir, I'm counting at least 40 heat signatures, possibly more in the structures we can't penetrate." He paused, rechecking his equipment. "This doesn't match the intel packet. Not even close." Thornton's jaw tightened beneath his balaclava. 24 hours earlier, on Christmas Eve morning, they'd received word that Harmon had been moved from Kabul to this remote location. The window for extraction was closing fast. Tomorrow, the Taliban would relocate him again, possibly across the Pakistani border where American forces couldn't follow without sparking an international incident. "Understood," Thornton replied, his voice carrying the weight of command. "We proceed as planned. Adapt on contact." The loadmaster held up 2 fingers. 2 minutes to landing zone. Thornton turned to address his team, running through final checks in his mind, and then he paused. Sitting at the rear of the cargo bay, almost invisible in the shadows, was a figure that didn't belong. A figure so out of place that for a moment, Thornton thought the stress of command had finally broken something in his perception. She was small, terribly, impossibly small for this environment, dwarfed by tactical gear that seemed designed for someone twice her size. In the dim red lighting of the cargo bay, she looked like a child playing dress-up in her father's military equipment. Kira Brennan, 15 years old. She stood barely 5'3", her dark hair pulled back in a tight braid beneath a watch cap that had seen better days. The TAC 338 sniper rifle across her lap was nearly as long as she was tall, its matte black finish absorbing the cabin's emergency lighting. The weapon was chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, capable of engaging targets beyond 1,500 meters in the right hands. The question was whether those hands belonged to a teenager who should be worrying about algebra tests, not providing overwatch for the most elite fighting force in the world. Thornton had read her classified file 3 times on the flight over. Asset designation, Sierra 7. Specialty, extreme long-range precision fire in adverse conditions, recruited by CIA 6 months prior. Training scores that defied belief. The file hadn't mentioned she would look like someone's daughter on Take Your Kid to Work Day. "Listen up," Thornton announced, his voice cutting through the helicopter's mechanical roar. "We have long-range support for this operation. This is Kira Brennan, call sign Sierra 7, on loan from Langley. She'll be providing precision fire from elevated positions." The reaction was immediate and predictable. Snickers rippled through the team like a wave. Petty Officer Donovan, 32 years old and built like a linebacker, leaned toward his partner with theatrical disbelief. His voice carried easily over the ambient noise. "She's 15. Did someone's daughter get lost? What is this, kindergarten sniper school?" More laughter, harder this time. The kind of laughter men use to mask uncertainty, to establish dominance, to remind themselves that they are the professionals here. Kira didn't flinch. Her fingers moved methodically across the rifle's scope, adjusting for altitude and expected wind speeds with the practiced ease of someone who had performed these calculations thousands of times. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the mockery. Her face remained as still as carved stone. She had heard worse during her 6 months at the CIA training facility in Virginia. Much worse. Words couldn't hurt her anymore. Words had stopped hurting the day they buried her father. "What's a kid gonna spot that our thermals can't?" Donovan continued, playing to his audience. "Maybe she can help us find Santa Claus while we're out there." Thornton held up a hand for silence. The laughter died, but the skepticism remained, written plainly on every visible face. Thornton understood their doubt. He shared it, truth be told. But the orders had come from high enough up the chain that questioning them wasn't an option. What troubled him more was what the file had revealed about her lineage. Information he hadn't shared with the team. Information that changed everything he thought he knew about the situation. Kira Brennan was the daughter of Master Sergeant Garrett Brennan, and Garrett Brennan had saved Jack Thornton's life in Fallujah 15 years ago. Pulled him from a burning Humvee while insurgent rounds cracked overhead, carried him 200 meters to the extraction point with 3 bullets in his own vest. Garrett Brennan had been a legend in Delta Force, a sniper instructor who trained 2 generations of operators. His specialty was teaching unconventional shooting techniques, the kind that saved lives when technology failed and conditions turned hostile. Men spoke his name with reverence in special operations circles. 1 year ago on Christmas Day, Garrett Brennan had died providing overwatch for a SEAL team in Yemen. He'd held his position for 40 minutes under withering fire, dropping hostile after hostile while the team extracted under heavy contact. He'd saved 11 lives that day. The 12th shot, the one aimed at him, came from a sniper he hadn't spotted in the chaos. Now his daughter sat in a helicopter on Christmas Eve, preparing to do what her father had done: protect operators who didn't know they needed protecting. Watch over men who couldn't see the threats she could see. The irony wasn't lost on Thornton. 30 seconds, the loadmaster shouted over the engine noise. The SEALs stood in unison, weapons ready, bodies tense with anticipation. 12 warriors preparing to step into the unknown. Kira rose last, the rifle slung across her back in a custom harness that distributed its considerable weight across her narrow shoulders. She moved to the ramp where snow and darkness waited beyond. Thornton grabbed her shoulder as they prepared to exit. His grip was firm but not unkind. "Stay behind us. Don't engage unless I give explicit authorization. Understood?" Kira met his eyes. In that moment, Thornton saw something that unsettled him deeply. Not defiance exactly, not fear, something else entirely. Quiet certainty, the look of someone who had already seen too much, the look of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Yes, sir." 2 words. Flat, professional, empty of everything except purpose. The ramp dropped with a hydraulic whine. Arctic winds slammed into the cargo bay like a physical assault, carrying snow that stung exposed skin like needles. The team flowed out into the white void, boots crunching on powder that had buried the abandoned Soviet-era base beneath 3 feet of accumulated winter. The Chinook's engine screamed as it pulled away, climbing rapidly to avoid potential ground fire. Within seconds it was gone, swallowed by the storm, leaving them in sudden, profound silence. The kind of silence that exists only in the high mountains. The kind that makes men feel very small and very alone. Thornton hand-signaled the formation. The compound was 200 meters northeast, nestled against a cliff face that provided natural protection from aerial observation. According to satellite imagery, the main structure was a 3-story concrete building, half collapsed from decades of neglect and conflict, with a maze of connected outbuildings spreading outward like the tentacles of some sleeping beast. Kira moved to the rear of the formation without being told, her eyes already scanning for elevated positions. The tree line to the west offered possibilities, but the angles were wrong for effective overwatch. She needed height. She needed clearance. She needed a position that would let her see what was coming before it arrived. The training her father had drilled into her played through her mind like a familiar song. Find your position. Know your exits. Calculate before you need to calculate. A sniper who thinks during the shot has already missed. Movement, 11 o'clock. Parker's whisper came through the radio, freezing the entire formation. Through the falling snow, shadows shifted near a burnt-out vehicle chassis 50 meters ahead. Too many shadows. Moving with purpose. I count 6 hostiles, Petty Officer Mercer reported, his voice barely audible. Maybe more behind them. They're setting up a perimeter. Thornton processed this information instantly. 6 hostiles visible meant at least twice that number concealed. The Taliban had learned hard lessons over 2 decades of fighting American special operations. They knew how to hide. They knew how to wait. Kira's hand moved to her rangefinder without conscious thought. 800 meters to the ridgeline above. Wind coming from the northwest at 15 kilometers per hour, gusting to 25. Temperature dropping as the storm intensified. She calculated the ballistic adjustments in her head, a skill her father had developed in her through endless practice sessions that began before she could ride a bicycle. "Sir," she whispered into her radio, "request permission to establish overwatch position. Western tree line, elevated ground." "Negative," Thornton replied immediately. "Hold position with the team." The shadows ahead multiplied. What had been 6 became 12, then 20. Thermal scopes painted them in shades of red and orange against the white landscape. Heat signatures that meant living bodies, meant weapons, meant hostile intent. "Commander!" It was Donovan, his earlier mockery replaced by professional concern. "We're walking into a kill zone. This is a setup." He was right, Kira realized with cold certainty. The compound wasn't a holding facility. It was a kill zone. The Taliban had known they were coming, had prepared, had waited. 40 heat signatures, the thermal had shown. But that was only what could be seen. How many more waited in buildings that blocked infrared scanning? How many more lurked in bunkers and tunnels that Soviet engineers had carved into these mountains decades ago? The team continued forward, professional caution slowing their advance. Each step brought them deeper into the trap. Each meter closed was a meter that would be harder to retreat. Kira felt the weight of her father's mirror in her chest pocket. A small thing, scratched and bent at one corner from years of use. He had given it to her 2 Christmases ago, the last Christmas they would ever share. "A mirror can save your life," he'd told her that morning, pressing it into her palm with hands that had never trembled, not even once. "It can check corners without exposing your position. It can signal aircraft when your radio fails. And most importantly, it can deceive an enemy sniper. Make them think they've spotted your scope glint when you're actually 3 feet to the left." She had thought it a strange gift at the time. Other fathers gave their daughters jewelry, electronics, things that sparkled and beeped. Her father gave her survival tools. Now she understood. Garrett Brennan had known somehow that his daughter would need every advantage he could provide. Had known that the skills he taught her would matter. Had known, perhaps, that he wouldn't always be there to protect her. The memory threatened to crack her concentration. She pushed it down, locked it away in the compartment where she kept all the things that could destroy her if she let them surface. "Clear your mind. Trust your instincts." Her scope swept across the terrain ahead, searching for what the others couldn't see. The thermal signatures were obvious now, dozens of them. But there was something else. Something wrong about the pattern of their movement. They weren't just waiting. They were hurting. "Commander," she transmitted again, urgency creeping into her voice despite her efforts to control it. "The enemy is repositioning. They're creating a crossfire zone. We need to hold position." "Noted." Thornton's reply carried a hint of irritation. "Maintain radio discipline, Sierra 7. The team continued advancing. Kira felt her heart rate increase, felt the familiar pre-combat tension that her father had taught her to channel rather than suppress. Something was very wrong. Something was about to happen. And then she saw him. 823 meters away, barely visible through the curtain of falling snow, a figure moved into position behind a low stone wall on the northern ridgeline. The posture was unmistakable to anyone who had spent years studying human movement through magnified optics. A soldier preparing to shoulder a weapon, not a rifle, something heavier, something that could kill them all. "RPG gunner." "RPG, northern ridgeline," she transmitted, her voice sharp with urgency. 823 meters, 10 degrees right of the main structure. He's about to fire." "I don't see anything," Donovan replied, skepticism dripping from every word. "There's nothing on thermal. He's behind stone cover. The wall is blocking his heat signature." Trust me, he's there. Silence on the radio. The team continued forward, approaching a cluster of burnt vehicles that offered temporary concealment. Thornton's voice came through, measured but tense. Sierra 7, are you certain about this contact? Kira didn't hesitate. Absolutely certain, sir. He's preparing to fire. We have seconds. The pause that followed lasted an eternity compressed into 3 heartbeats. Thornton was weighing the credibility of a 15-year-old girl against the judgment of his experienced operators, weighing the risk of reacting to a phantom threat against the catastrophe of ignoring a real one. All elements, find hard cover, now! The SEALs scattered, diving behind vehicles, rocks, anything solid enough to stop shrapnel. The movement was instant, professional, born of years of training that had transformed conscious thought into unconscious action. 3 seconds later, a rocket-propelled grenade streaked through the falling snow like a meteor from hell. It impacted the burnt vehicle chassis they had been using for cover, the vehicle they would have been standing beside if Thornton hadn't given the order. The explosion was massive. The fireball bloomed orange against the white landscape, shrapnel singing through the air in every direction. The concussive wave hit like a physical blow, rattling equipment and ringing ears. Snow vaporized in a 20-meter radius, replaced by smoke and fire and the acrid smell of high explosives. "Contact north!" Parker shouted into the radio, his voice cracking with adrenaline. A second RPG followed, then a third. The Taliban had revealed their ambush, and it was devastating. Machine gun fire erupted from multiple positions, tracers cutting through the darkness like angry hornets. The carefully prepared kill zone had been sprung, and the SEALs were caught in its teeth. Thornton's voice cut through the chaos. "All elements return fire. Find cover and engage." The team responded with the disciplined fury of men who had trained their entire adult lives for moments like this. Rifles cracked. Grenades flew. The night erupted into a symphony of violence that echoed off the mountain walls. But they were pinned. The high ground belonged to the enemy. Every attempt to advance was met with withering fire. Every attempt to retreat exposed them to crossfire from positions they couldn't see. "We need to take out those RPG positions," Thornton shouted over the din. "Donovan, Mercer, suppressing fire on the ridgeline." The 2 operators opened up with their HK-416 rifles, but the range was too great for effective fire. 800 meters in a blizzard. The snow swallowed their tracers like a hungry ghost. Kira made her decision. She didn't ask for permission, didn't wait for authorization. The memory of her father surfaced unbidden, his steady words from 1,000 training sessions echoing in her mind. "Sometimes the right thing to do is the thing they'll court-martial you for, but you'll be alive to face that court-martial." She low-crawled away from the main group, heading for a cluster of pine trees 30 meters west. Her father's rifle dragged behind her, its weight distributed through the sling that pressed against her narrow shoulders. The snow soaked through her jacket as she moved, cold biting into her skin, but she barely noticed. Move. Don't think. Trust the training. 40 meters. 50. The pine trees loomed ahead, their branches heavy with accumulated snow, their trunks offering concealment from enemy observation. She slipped between 2 trees, finding a natural depression in the ground that provided both cover and a clear line of sight to the ridgeline. The position wasn't perfect. She was exposed on her right flank, but it offered the angle she needed. Kira deployed the rifle's bipod, settling into a prone shooting position that felt as natural as breathing. Through the scope, she acquired the first target, an RPG gunner partially concealed behind stacked stones, preparing to fire again. Range, 823 meters. Wind, northwest at 20 kilometers per hour, gusting unpredictably. Temperature, -20 Celsius. She would need to account for air density at this altitude, the Coriolis effect at this latitude, even the fact that her barrel was cold and would heat with each subsequent shot. The calculations flowed through her mind in seconds, muscle memory and training combining into instinct. She adjusted the scope's turrets, compensating for bullet drop and wind drift with micro movements that would have been invisible to an untrained eye. Breathe in, breathe out. Find the natural respiratory pause, the moment between heartbeats when the body is perfectly still. Her finger took up the trigger slack, feeling the precise resistance that separated intent from action. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The suppressor reduced the report to a sharp crack that was instantly swallowed by wind and distance. Through the scope, she watched the RPG gunner collapse, his body folding in on itself as if someone had cut his strings. RPG position 1 neutralized, she transmitted, her voice as calm as if she were reporting the weather. Acquiring second target. The second gunner was scrambling for his fallen comrade's weapon, moving with the desperate speed of a man who had just watched death claim the space beside him. Kira tracked him smoothly, leading his movement by half a body width. The second shot took him in the upper chest. He fell backward into the snow, arms splayed, weapon tumbling from nerveless fingers. Position 2 down. Engaging position 3. The third target was more difficult. He had realized what was happening, realized that something was hunting them from a distance they couldn't comprehend. He dropped behind cover, presenting only his elbow and part of his knee. Not enough for a clean shot. Kira waited, breathing slowly, watching. 10 seconds passed. 20. The battle raged below, muzzle flashes strobing through the snowfall, but she remained focused on her target, patient. Her father had taught her that patience was a sniper's greatest weapon. The ability to wait while chaos swirled around you, the discipline to hold fire until the shot was right. The man shifted, trying to get a better angle on the seals below. As he moved, his head rose above the wall for just a fraction of a second. Kira fired. The bullet entered through his left eye. He dropped without a sound. All RPG positions neutralized, she reported. Ridgeline clear. Approach is secure. The radio was silent for 3 full seconds. Then Thornton's voice came through, carrying a note of something that might have been disbelief, or might have been the first stirring of respect. Sierra 7, confirm you just engaged 3 targets at 800 meters, in a blizzard. Confirmed, sir. 823 meters. The approach is clear. Another pause. Longer this time. Outstanding shooting, Sierra 7. Hold your position and provide overwatch. Kira allowed herself a small smile, invisible beneath her balaclava. The first crack had appeared in the wall of skepticism, the first proof that she belonged here, regardless of what the calendar said about her age. Below, the SEALs began to advance again, moving more confidently now that the immediate threat from the high ground had been eliminated. They flowed through the terrain like water finding its path, professional and deadly. Donovan's voice crackled through the radio, stripped of its earlier mockery. Sierra 7, whoever the hell you are. That was some damn fine shooting. Kira didn't respond. She was already scanning for the next threat, her scope sweeping across the compound ahead. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she felt her father's presence, watching over her as she watched over others, teaching her still, even from beyond the grave. The mission continued. The snow continued to fall, and Kira Brennan continued to prove that age was just a number when lives hung in the balance. The SEALs had laughed at her 90 minutes ago. Now 3 of them were alive because of shots they never saw coming, fired by a girl they had dismissed as a joke. Before the night was over, that number would grow. Before the night was over, they would understand what Commander Thornton already suspected. The daughter of Garrett Brennan had inherited more than just his name. She had inherited his gift, and she was only getting started. The compound erupted into hell. Muzzle flashes strobed from every direction, transforming the snow-covered battlefield into a nightmare landscape of light and shadow. Tracer rounds carved burning lines through the darkness, red and green streaks that crisscrossed above the SEALs' heads like deadly fireworks. The sound was overwhelming. AK-47s crackled in staccato bursts. PKM machine guns roared with the deep-throated thunder of heavy weapons. RPGs whooshed overhead, their exhaust trails glowing orange against the white storm. Thornton pressed his back against a crumbling concrete wall, rounds impacting inches from his position. Chips of stone peppered his face. The situation had deteriorated faster than he'd thought possible. All elements, sound off, he barked into his radio. Give me status. The responses came rapid fire, clipped and professional despite the chaos. Parker covering east approach, taking heavy fire. Donovan pinned at the motor pool, multiple hostiles, 40 meters. Mercer, With Langley, he's hit, shrapnel in the leg, he's stable but immobile. Thornton processed this information with the cold calculation of 3 decades of combat experience. One man wounded. The team scattered and pinned. Enemy forces converging from at least 3 directions. Intel had promised 20 hostiles at most. They were facing 60, maybe more. The thermal imaging couldn't penetrate the thick stone walls of the compound's buildings. Every structure could hide a dozen fighters. Every shadow could conceal death. Sierra 7, what do you see from your position? Kira's voice came back steady, almost unnaturally calm for someone in the middle of a firefight. Counting approximately 65 hostiles, Commander. They're coordinating movement through the compound's internal corridors. Looks like they've trained for this. This isn't militia. This is organized. Organized. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Taliban militias were dangerous but predictable. They fought with passion but often lacked tactical discipline. What Thornton was seeing tonight was different. These fighters were using proper fire and maneuver tactics, establishing interlocking fields of fire, moving in coordinated teams. Someone had trained them, someone with professional military experience. Sierra 7, can you suppress the eastern machine gun position? It's got Parker pinned. Already on it, sir. Through her scope, Kira tracked the machine gun nest. 2 men crouched behind sandbags on a second-floor balcony, their PKM spitting fire into the courtyard below. 645 meters. Child's play compared to the ridgeline shots. She adjusted for the slight downward angle, compensated for the wind that had shifted 10 degrees in the last minute. The world contracted to a single point. Just the crosshairs. Just the target. Just this moment. The first gunner's head snapped back. His partner froze for a fatal second, staring at the blood spray that had painted the wall beside him. That second cost him everything. Kira's follow-up shot caught him in the throat. Eastern machine gun neutralized. Parker, you're clear to move. Copy that, Sierra 7. Moving now. Donovan's voice crackled through the radio, the last traces of mockery completely absent. She's doing it again, Commander. That's 5 kills confirmed. In conditions I can barely see through. Thornton didn't respond. His attention was fixed on a new problem. Movement in his peripheral vision. Shadows converging on Mercer's position, where the medic was treating Langley's wounds. Mercer, you have hostiles approaching from the north. 3, maybe 4. 50 meters in closing. I see them. Can't engage without abandoning Langley. Kira was already pivoting, her scope tracking across the compound. She found the approaching fighters, 4 men moving in a tactical crouch, using the ruined vehicles for cover as they advanced on the wounded SEAL. The first shot dropped the point man. The others scattered, diving for cover, but Kira had anticipated their movement. The second shot caught one mid-dive, spinning him into the snow. The third and fourth fighters made it behind a burned-out truck, but they were pinned now, unable to advance. 2 down, 2 suppressed. Mercer, you have a window. Get Langley to better cover. Moving, and Sierra 7. Thanks. The battle continued to rage, but the momentum had shifted. Every time the Taliban attempted to maneuver, every time they tried to establish a firing position, Kira was there, watching, waiting, eliminating threats before they could fully materialize. 12 shots fired, 10 confirmed kills. The SEALs began to advance, moving through the compound with renewed aggression. The enemy's numerical advantage meant nothing when their fighters kept dropping from unseen fire. Fear began to spread through the Taliban ranks. They had planned for American special operators. They had not planned for the ghost in the snow who killed without warning from impossible distances. And then everything changed. Kira was tracking a group of fighters near the main building when movement in her peripheral vision made her freeze. Something wrong. Something different. On the northeast tower, a crumbling minaret that rose above the compound like a broken finger pointing at heaven, a figure had appeared. The way he moved was immediately distinct from the Taliban fighters below. No wasted motion, no nervous energy, every step deliberate, every position calculated, professional. He settled into a prone position, his rifle extending over the tower's edge. Even at this distance, Kira recognized the weapon. SVD Dragunov, Russian. modified with what looked like a custom suppressor, a serious weapon for a serious shooter. Not Taliban, something else entirely. The sniper's first shot cracked across the compound, and Petty Officer Donovan stumbled, clutching his shoulder. He went down hard, blood already darkening his tactical vest. "Donovan's hit!" Parker screamed into the radio. "Sniper fire from the northeast tower." "I see him," Kira responded, already adjusting her position. "Engaging now." But as she centered her scope on the distant figure, something made her hesitate. Something about the way he held his weapon, the angle of his body, the particular rhythm of his breathing as he prepared for his next shot. She knew that rhythm. Her father had taught her to read shooters by their body language, to understand their training and background from the way they positioned themselves behind a rifle. Different schools produced different styles. Russian snipers held their weapons differently than American snipers. British different from Israeli. This shooter's style was Spetsnaz, Russian Special Forces, elite. But there was something else, something layered on top of the Russian foundation. Adaptations and refinements that spoke of years of mercenary work, fighting in different conflicts, learning from different enemies. And then the sniper shifted slightly, his face catching the faint moonlight that filtered through the clouds. Kira's blood turned to ice. She had seen that face before. Not in person, in photographs, in the classified files that the CIA had reluctantly shown her during her training. The files about her father's death. Alexei Volkov, call sign The Ghost, former Spetsnaz, dishonorably discharged for brutality even the Russian military found excessive, mercenary for hire to the highest bidder. He had fought in Syria, Libya, and a dozen other conflicts, selling his skills to warlords and terrorist organizations. 1 year ago, on Christmas Day, Alexei Volkov had been providing overwatch for a Taliban commander in Yemen. When SEAL Team 4 had arrived to extract hostages, Volkov had engaged them from an elevated position. Master Sergeant Garrett Brennan had spent 40 minutes countering Volkov's fire, protecting the extraction team, saving 11 lives through sheer skill and determination. The 12th shot had come when Garrett was repositioning. A moment of exposure, a fraction of a second when his body rose above cover. Volkov hadn't missed. Now that same man was here. 1 year later, Christmas Eve instead of Christmas Day. Different country, same enemy. The universe had a cruel sense of poetry. Kira felt her hands begin to shake. For the first time since the mission began, emotion threatened to override training. Rage, grief, the desperate need for revenge that she had buried so deep she thought she'd conquered it. The man who killed her father was 1,100 meters away, looking through his own scope, hunting the men she was sworn to protect. Steady. Let the rage pass through you like wind through branches. The lesson came from somewhere deep inside, a survival instinct carved into her bones through years of repetition. She forced her breathing to slow, forced her hands to still. The shaking subsided, replaced by the cold precision that had carried her through 6 months of training and 12 kills tonight. This wasn't about revenge. This was about protecting the SEALs. This was about finishing what her father started. This was about proving that Garrett Brennan's legacy lived on in his daughter. "Commander," she transmitted, her voice flat and empty of the storm raging inside her. "The sniper on the northeast tower, Russian-trained mercenary, highly skilled. He's the one who shot Donovan. Can you neutralize him?" "Working on it, sir." She settled deeper into her position, adjusting her scope for the increased distance. 1,134 meters. The farthest shot she had ever attempted outside of controlled range conditions. In a blizzard, with wind gusting unpredictably. Against a target who was every bit as skilled as she was. Against the man who had taken everything from her. Kira took her shot. The rifle bucked. The bullet traveled for nearly 2.5 seconds, fighting wind and gravity in the cruel mathematics of extreme range ballistics. It missed. 6 inches left of target. A gust of wind she hadn't fully anticipated. Volkov was already moving before the bullet impacted the stone where his head had been a heartbeat earlier. He knew. A return shot cracked past Kira's position, close enough that she felt the pressure wave against her cheek. Volkov had located her muzzle flash, had calculated her position, had nearly killed her with his response. For the first time tonight, Kira felt fear. Not fear of death. She had made peace with that possibility when she accepted this mission. Fear of failure. Fear that she wasn't good enough. Fear that her father's killer would escape again, would claim more lives, would continue spreading death across the world. She forced the fear down, locked it away with the rage and grief. Later. Feel it later. Now she had to shoot. The duel began in earnest. Kira fired. Volkov moved. His return shot tore through the branches above her head, showering her with pine needles and snow. She shifted position, low crawling through powder that soaked through her clothing, numbing her skin. Another shot, another miss. The wind was impossible to predict at this distance. Every gust could shift a bullet's trajectory by inches, and inches meant the difference between a kill and a wasted round. Volkov was patient. He waited for her to shoot, marked her position from the muzzle flash, then returned fire with terrifying accuracy. Each exchange brought his bullets closer to her body. He was better than her, more experienced, more patient. He had been doing this for 20 years while she had been alive for only 15. But she had something he didn't have. She had her father's mirror. The memory surfaced like a gift from beyond the grave. Her father's voice on that Christmas morning 2 years ago, pressing the scratched silver mirror into her palm. Most importantly, it can deceive an enemy sniper. Make them think they've spotted your scope glint when you're actually 3 feet to the left. Kira pulled the mirror from her chest pocket, feeling its familiar weight. She studied the battlefield, calculated angles, searched for the moonlight that occasionally broke through the storm clouds. There. A brief clearing in the weather, pale light filtering through. She positioned the mirror carefully, angling it to catch that faint illumination, creating a reflection that would look exactly like the glint of a rifle scope to anyone watching from the northeast tower. She placed it 3 feet to her right, wedged between rocks where it would stay steady. Then she settled into a new position, her rifle trained on Volkov's location, and waited. Seconds passed. The battle continued below, but Kira's world had narrowed to a single point of focus. The tower. The shooter. The moment that would determine whether she lived or died. Volkov took the bait. His muzzle flash lit the tower as he fired at the false target, the mirror that gleamed like a scope in the filtered moonlight. In that fraction of a second, he was exposed. Committed to a shot at a target that didn't exist. Kira was already squeezing her trigger. The bullet traveled for nearly 3 seconds, the longest 3 seconds of her life. She watched through her scope, not breathing, not moving, not thinking. Impact. Volkov jerked backward, his rifle tumbling from his hands. He collapsed against the tower's railing, then slowly, almost gracefully, toppled over the edge. His body fell 30 feet, landing in the snow below with a muffled thump that Kira couldn't hear, but somehow felt. "Tower sniper eliminated," she reported, her voice steady despite the trembling that had begun deep in her chest. "Threat neutralized." The radio was silent for a moment. Then Thornton's voice came through, carrying something that might have been awe. "Sierra 7, did you just make a kill shot at 1,100 meters? In a blizzard?" 1,134 meters, sir. The approach to the main building should be clear now." "Outstanding. Absolutely outstanding." Below, the momentum of the battle shifted decisively. Without the elevated sniper threat, the SEALs advanced with renewed aggression. The Taliban fighters, already demoralized by the unseen killer in the hills, began to fall back toward the main compound. Kira remained in position, providing overwatch, but her mind was elsewhere. She had killed the man who murdered her father. She had expected to feel satisfaction, triumph, some sense of closure. Instead, she felt empty. The revenge she had dreamed about for a year had come and gone in the space of a trigger pull, and nothing had changed. Her father was still dead. She was still alone. The world was still full of violence and loss. But the SEALs were alive. Donovan was wounded but stable. The mission continued. That had to be enough. The team reached the main building's entrance. A reinforced door, steel behind weathered wood. Parker placed a breaching charge while the others stacked up, weapons ready. Breaching in 3, 2, 1. The explosion blew the door inward. The SEALs flowed through the opening like water through a broken dam. their movements synchronized by years of training. Muzzle flashes strobed inside. Shots crackled and echoed. Kira tracked what she could see through windows and doorways, but most of the fighting was now inside the structure. Beyond her ability to support, she could only wait. Watch. Trust that the men she had protected would complete the mission. Ground floor clear, Thornton reported. Moving to upper levels. More shooting. More movement. The radio chatter painted a picture of room-by-room combat, close quarters violence where inches determined survival. Second floor clear. One hostile down. Third floor. Contact. Multiple hostiles. Grenades detonated. Automatic weapons fire. Then gradually the shooting died down, replaced by the systematic sounds of a tactical team securing a structure. Building secure. Thornton's voice carried exhaustion, but also something else. Relief. We found Ambassador Harmon. He's alive. Beaten up, but alive. Kira allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The primary objective was achieved. The mission was a success. Then Mercer's voice came through the radio, carrying a note of confusion that immediately put her on alert. Commander, we've got something else here. A secondary holding cell in the basement. There's a child. The words hit Kira like a physical blow. A child. In a Taliban compound. In a room designed to hold prisoners. Repeat that, Mercer. A child? Affirmative, sir. Young girl, maybe 10 years old. She's terrified but appears unharmed. Thornton's response was immediate. Secure her. Get her ready for extraction. Sir, there's something else. Based on the documents we're finding, she's the daughter of a local interpreter who worked with American forces. The Taliban killed her entire family. They were using her as leverage against other potential collaborators. Kira felt her grip tighten on her rifle. A 10-year-old girl. Alone, surrounded by men who had murdered her parents, held in darkness as a tool for terror and intimidation. The mission had changed. This was no longer just about extracting an ambassador. This was about saving a child who had nothing left. I have movement, Kira suddenly announced, her scope tracking new activity at the compound's edge. Vehicles approaching from the south. 3 trucks. They're loaded with fighters. Reinforcements, Thornton said grimly. Time to extraction? Chinook is 12 minutes out. The trucks will be here in 7. 12 minutes. They needed to hold this position with wounded men and 2 hostages against a fresh wave of enemy fighters. The mathematics were brutal. All elements, prepare for defense. Sierra 7, I need you to slow those vehicles down. Copy that, Commander. Kira adjusted her position, bringing the approaching convoy into her scope. 3 technical trucks, each mounted with a heavy machine gun, each carrying what looked like 8 to 10 fighters. Maybe 30 fresh combatants against a battered SEAL team. She couldn't stop them, but she could buy time. Her first shot took out the driver of the lead vehicle. The truck swerved, crashed into a snowbank, and rolled onto its side. Fighters spilled out, some injured, all disoriented. The second truck tried to navigate around its fallen companion. Kira put a bullet through its radiator, then another through the driver when he tried to continue forward. The engine died, steam erupted from the hood. The third truck slammed to a stop, its occupants diving for cover. They were learning, adapting. They knew now that death waited in the hills, invisible and patient. But they kept coming. On foot now, using the ruined vehicles for cover, the reinforcements advanced on the compound. Kira engaged them methodically, one shot at a time, forcing them to move slowly, to stay low, to fear every step forward. 6 minutes to Chinook, Thornton reported. How are you doing, Sierra 7? Slowing them down, sir, but they're still coming. Keep at it. You're buying us everything. The next 6 minutes were the longest of Kira's life. She fired until her shoulder ached, until her fingers were numb from cold, until her scope began to fog from the contrast between her warm breath and the frozen air. 23 shots total, 18 kills. The snow around the convoy approach was stained with dark patches that stood out against the white, and still they came. The first fighters reached the compound's outer wall just as the Chinook's rotors became audible in the distance. A race now. Extraction versus assault. Seconds determining whether this mission ended in success or tragedy. All elements, move to extraction point, Thornton commanded. Sierra 7, covering fire until we're aboard. Copy that. Kira provided fire as the SEALs emerged from the building, moving in tactical formation toward the helicopter landing zone. Thornton carried the ambassador over one shoulder. Mercer had the little girl wrapped in his jacket, her face buried against his chest. Donovan moved under his own power despite his wounded shoulder, rifle up, still fighting. The Chinook descended through the blizzard, its rotors whipping snow into a blinding vortex. The crew chief threw open the rear ramp. SEALs began loading casualties and hostages. Enemy fighters breached the outer wall. Kira dropped two before they could establish firing positions. Parker and Donovan engaged the others, their rifles cracking in controlled bursts. Sierra 7, get to the extraction point now. On my way. Kira broke cover and ran. Really ran for the first time tonight. Her rifle slapped against her back. Her boots churned through powder. Her lungs burned with frozen air. Behind her, bullets cracked and whined. The enemy had spotted her movement, had found the ghost at last. 50 meters to the helicopter. 40, 30. A round tugged at her sleeve. Another kicked up snow by her feet. She didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. 20 meters. 10. Hands grabbed her, hauled her up the ramp, pulled her into the cargo bay. The Chinook was already lifting off, the ground falling away beneath them, the enemy fighters shrinking to insignificant dots in the white landscape. We're clear, the pilot announced, heading to Bagram. Kira collapsed against the helicopter's bulkhead, breathing hard, her body trembling with exhaustion and cold in the aftermath of adrenaline. Around her, the SEALs were treating wounds, securing equipment, doing the 100 small tasks that followed every combat operation. Donovan appeared in front of her. His shoulder was bandaged, his face pale from blood loss, but his eyes were clear. He extended his good hand. Sierra 7. Kira. He used her name for the first time. I owe you my life. Probably twice over. She took his hand. His grip was firm despite his injury. Just doing my job. No. He shook his head. You did a hell of a lot more than that. We all laughed at you back there, mocked you, and you saved us anyway. He paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily to men like him. Your father would be proud. I never knew him, but I know his reputation. And I know that what you did tonight honors everything he stood for. Kira felt something crack inside her chest. The wall she had built around her emotions, the barrier that kept the grief and rage and loneliness contained, developed its first fracture. She didn't cry, not yet, but she knew the tears would come later, when she was alone, when the mission was over, when there was nothing left to do but feel. Thank you, she whispered. Donovan nodded once, then moved away to let the medic check her for injuries. Across the cargo bay, the little girl sat wrapped in a survival blanket, her dark eyes watching everything with the hyper-awareness of a child who had seen too much. Kira met her gaze and saw something there that she recognized. Loneliness. Loss. The terrible knowledge that the world was not a safe place, but also something else. Something that looked almost like hope. They had saved her. Against all odds, against an enemy that outnumbered them 3-1, against weather and terrain and circumstances that should have killed them all. They had pulled one small girl out of the darkness. That had to mean something. Thornton sat down beside Kira, his movements heavy with exhaustion. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Just sat there. Two warriors sharing silence after battle. 18 confirmed kills, he finally said, including a counter-sniper engagement at over 1,100 meters, in a blizzard. He shook his head slowly. I've been doing this for 30 years, Kira. Worked with the best shooters in the world. What you did tonight, he trailed off, searching for words. My father taught me, Kira said simply. Garrett Brennan. Thornton nodded. He saved my life in Fallujah, 2009. Pulled me out of a burning vehicle while half the city was shooting at us. He turned to look at her, really look, for the first time seeing not a teenager out of place, but a fellow warrior who had earned her position. I've been carrying that debt for 15 years. Tonight, his daughter saved my entire team. The Brennan legacy continues. Kira reached into her chest pocket and pulled out the mirror, scratched, dented, stained now with sweat and melted snow. She held it up, catching the dim red light of the cargo bay. He gave me this 2 Christmases ago, told me it could save my life someday. And did it? It helped me kill the sniper in the tower, the one who shot Donovan. She paused, her jaw tightening. The same sniper who killed my father in Yemen. 1 year ago today. Thornton was silent for a long moment, processing this information. When he spoke, his voice was soft. You knew? When you took that shot, you knew who he was? Yes. And you still made it about the mission, still focused on protecting the team rather than pursuing revenge. He let out a long breath. That's what separates professionals from amateurs, Kira. The ability to set aside personal feelings when lives are on the line. Your father had that ability. Clearly, so do you. The helicopter droned on through the night, carrying them away from the mountains, away from the compound, away from the bodies that would be buried by snow before morning. The mission wasn't over yet. There was still the extraction to complete, the hostages to deliver, the wounded to treat, but the worst was behind them, or so they thought. Because somewhere in the compound they had just left, hidden in a false wall compartment in the basement just meters from where they had found Layla, one man had survived. One threat had remained concealed while the SEALs cleared the building room by room. Karim Nazari, Taliban commander, had waited in darkness while his men died around him, had listened to the American boots above his head, had heard them take the girl he had sworn to kill. When the helicopter lifted off, he had emerged from his hiding place, wounded, bleeding, but alive. And as the Chinook disappeared into the blizzard, Nazari had begun to run toward the motor pool, toward the vehicles the SEALs thought they had disabled, toward one final chance at the vengeance that consumed his soul. The fight for survival was about to enter its final, most desperate phase. And Kira Brennan would face a choice that would haunt her forever. The Chinook banked hard over the mountain ridge, its rotors straining against the thin air and howling wind. Inside the cargo bay, the SEALs had settled into the familiar routine of post-combat decompression. Weapons were being checked. Wounds were being treated. The adrenaline that had kept them alive was slowly draining away, leaving behind exhaustion and the quiet satisfaction of a mission accomplished. Ambassador Richard Harmon sat against the bulkhead, a thermal blanket wrapped around his shoulders. His face was swollen, purple bruises marking where his captors had beaten him during interrogation. But his eyes were clear, alert, taking in everything around him with the keen observation of a career diplomat. The little girl, Layla, remained curled in Mercer's lap. She hadn't spoken a word since they found her in that basement cell. Hadn't cried, hadn't screamed. She simply watched with those dark, ancient eyes that had seen too much for 10 years of life. Kira understood that silence. She had lived in it for a year after her father's death. 5 minutes to Bagram, the pilot announced over the internal comms. Medical team standing by. Thornton nodded, allowing himself a moment of relief. The mission was nearly complete. Both hostages recovered. One SEAL wounded but stable, against 60-plus hostiles in a prepared ambush, in weather that should have made operations impossible. They had won. And then the pilot's voice came through again, sharp with sudden alarm. Commander, we've got a problem. Picking up emergency beacon from the compound. Someone activated it after we left. Thornton's exhaustion vanished instantly. What kind of beacon? Standard military distress signal. But it's broadcasting on a frequency that... Sir, it's broadcasting on our frequency. Someone down there has American equipment. The implications hit like a physical blow. American equipment meant the Taliban had captured gear from a previous engagement. Or it meant something worse. Something that changed everything. Can you identify the source? Working on it. The signal is coming from the main building. Basement level. Mercer looked up from where he was comforting Layla. Commander, we cleared that building. Room by room. There was no one left alive. Apparently we missed something. Thornton's jaw tightened. Or someone was playing dead until we left. Kira's mind raced through the possibilities. The basement had been dark, cluttered with debris and abandoned equipment. They had found Layla in a cell at the far end. But there had been other rooms, other spaces they hadn't fully explored because they were running out of time. False walls, hidden compartments, the kind of concealment that Soviet engineers had built into these mountain structures decades ago. Sir, Parker's voice was grim. If someone down there has our equipment, they have our comm frequencies. They've been listening to everything we've said since extraction. The temperature in the cargo bay seemed to drop 10 degrees. They know we have the girl, Donovan said slowly. They know we're heading to Bagram. They know our flight path. Thornton was already moving, grabbing the satellite phone mounted near the crew chief's station. Command, this is Viper 6. We have a potential security breach, requesting immediate fighter escort and alternative landing zone. The response crackled with static. Viper 6, copy your situation. Diverting assets now. Be advised we're picking up unusual activity at the compound. Thermal shows a single individual moving toward the motor pool. The trucks, Kira said suddenly. The ones I disabled during the firefight. If someone repairs one of them... She didn't need to finish the sentence. If the Taliban had a working vehicle and knew their flight path, they could set up an ambush anywhere along the route. A helicopter flying low through mountain passes was vulnerable. Catastrophically vulnerable. Pilot, new flight plan. Take us higher. Avoid the passes. Sir, at this altitude with this weather, going higher means... I know what it means. Do it anyway. The Chinook's engine screamed as it climbed, fighting gravity in thin air. The cargo bay shuddered. Equipment rattled against tie-downs. Layla whimpered for the first time, pressing closer to Mercer. And then the satellite phone crackled again with a voice that froze everyone in place. Commander Thornton. The accent was Afghan, but the English was perfect, educated. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Thornton's eyes narrowed. Who is this? My name is Karim Nazari. Perhaps your intelligence briefings mention me. Perhaps not. Your agencies have so many enemies that we tend to blur together, yes? Kira watched Thornton's face harden. She didn't recognize the name, but she recognized the reaction. Whoever Karim Nazari was, he was significant. What do you want, Nazari? A trade, simple and civilized. You have the girl. I want her back. Land your helicopter, leave her behind, and you can continue to your base. No more fighting, no more death. Christmas mercy. Why is the girl so important to you? A pause. When Nazari spoke again, his voice carried something that might have been genuine emotion. Her father was a traitor. He sold his people to the Americans for money and promises. My men found him, as we find all traitors eventually. But the girl escaped before we could complete our justice. She's 10 years old. Old enough to remember. Old enough to talk. Old enough to identify faces and locations that your intelligence agencies would find very interesting. Another pause. She is a loose end, Commander. I do not leave loose ends. Thornton's response was immediate. Not happening. This conversation is over. Then I should tell you about the surface-to-air missile my men are positioning in the Koust Pass. You'll be entering its range in approximately 4 minutes. The Stinger is an excellent weapon. Your own engineers designed it. Very effective against helicopters. The cargo bay went silent. Stinger missiles. American-made. Probably captured during the decades of conflict that had turned Afghanistan into a graveyard of empires. In the hands of trained operators, they were nearly impossible to defeat at low altitude. You're bluffing, Thornton said, but his voice lacked conviction. Perhaps, but can you take that chance? With your wounded men? With your precious ambassador? With the girl you're so determined to save? Nazari's voice hardened. 4 minutes, Commander. Land the helicopter. Leave the girl, or everyone dies. The connection went dead. Thornton turned to face his team. 12 faces stared back at him, waiting for orders. These were men who had followed him into hell and back. Men who trusted him to make the right call even when there were no right calls to make. Options, he said flatly. We can't land, Parker responded immediately. Even if we give them the girl, there's no guarantee they'll let us go. Nazari's a tactical commander. He'd see us on the ground as an opportunity, not an obligation. Agreed, Donovan added. But if he really has a Stinger, he has something. Mercer looked up from his equipment. I'm picking up targeting radar. Intermittent, but it's there. Someone down there has anti-aircraft capability. The pilot's voice cut through. Commander, I can try to climb above the Stinger's effective ceiling, but at this altitude, with this load, I can't guarantee the engines will hold. We push them too hard, we go down anyway. No good options. Only bad ones and worse ones. Thornton looked at Layla. The little girl had stopped watching the adults. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, her small body curled into itself like she was trying to disappear. She knew. Somehow she understood that she was the center of this impossible equation, that men were debating whether her life was worth risking everyone else's. We're not giving her up. Thornton's voice was steel. Find me another way. Kira had been silent through the entire exchange, her mind working through possibilities with the cold calculation her father had taught her. Now she spoke. The Stinger has a maximum effective range of about 4 kilometers. If we can locate the launch team and neutralize them before we enter that range. We're in a helicopter, Donovan interrupted. Moving target, at night, in a blizzard. You can't shoot from a moving platform at this distance. I can if you give me a stable hover. Every eye in the cargo bay turned to her. The Stinger team will need to set up in a position with clear line of sight to the pass. That limits their options. There are only 3 locations that meet those criteria. Kira pulled out her tactical map, spreading it across her lap. Here, here, or here. If we can approach from the north, using this ridge for cover, we can get within range before they can engage. How close would we need to get? 800 meters, maybe 1,000 if conditions improve. Thornton studied the map, then studied her. You're talking about a precision shot from a hovering helicopter in a blizzard against a concealed target you've never seen. Yes, sir. What's your confidence level? Kira met his gaze without flinching. Higher than our chances of surviving a Stinger strike. The helicopter lurched as the pilot fought a gust of wind. Somewhere in the mountains below, a missile team was preparing to kill them all. Time was running out. Thornton made his decision. Do it. Pilot, adjust course. Take us around the North Ridge. Crew chief, get her a stable firing position at the rear ramp. The next 3 minutes were controlled chaos. The Chinook banked hard, diving toward the ridge that would provide cover from the missile team's line of sight. Kira moved to the rear of the cargo bay, where the crew chief was already lowering the ramp. Wind and snow blasted into the cabin. The temperature plummeted. Kira ignored it all, setting up her rifle on an improvised rest made from ammunition crates and cargo straps. 30 seconds to line of sight, the pilot announced. I'll give you the steadiest hover I can, but it won't be perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be enough. Through her scope, Kira watched the terrain scroll past. Snow-covered ridges, dark patches of exposed rock, the endless white void of the blizzard. And then she saw it, a glint of metal against the snow. Movement where there should be none. 3 figures huddled around a launcher, their bodies creating heat signatures that stood out against the frozen landscape. I have visual. 3 targets. Range, 1,100 meters. That's beyond your stated parameters, Thornton said over the internal comm. Yes, sir, but I can make the shot. The helicopter slowed, transitioning to a hover that sent vibrations through every surface. The crew chief braced himself against the bulkhead. The SEALs held on to whatever they could find. Kira blocked it all out. Just her, the rifle, the targets. One final echo of wisdom, rising from the depths of her training. The world shrinks to the space between your eye and the target. Nothing else exists. The first shot took the man with the launcher. He dropped without a sound, the Stinger falling into the snow beside him. The second man dove for the weapon, and Kira tracked him, leading his movement, squeezing the trigger as he reached for the launcher. He fell across his companion's body. The third man ran. Smart. He knew he couldn't win this fight, but there was nowhere to run at 1,100 meters. Nowhere to hide from the ghost in the sky. Kira's third shot ended his flight. All targets neutralized. Threat eliminated. The pilot didn't wait for orders. The Chinook surged forward, engines screaming, leaving the mountain pass behind. They climbed until the air grew thin and the helicopter shuddered with effort. But they climbed alive. It was over. Almost. Commander, the crew chief's voice was sharp with alarm. We have a stowaway situation. Someone came up through the maintenance hatch. Kira spun around, rifle rising, and found herself staring at a nightmare. Kareem Nazari stood in the center of the cargo bay, one arm wrapped around Layla's throat, the other holding a pistol pressed against her temple. Blood seeped from a wound in his side, dark and wet against his torn clothing. His face was a mask of determination and barely controlled agony. He had been in the compound when they breached it, hidden in a false wall compartment in the basement, meters from where they found Layla. When the SEALs rushed to the extraction point, he had followed in the chaos of the blizzard, using the whiteout conditions as cover. In the frantic moments of boarding, while everyone focused on getting the wounded and hostages aboard, he had slipped beneath the helicopter's rear ramp, wedging himself into the external cargo netting that hung beneath the fuselage. The brutal cold had nearly killed him. The wind had torn at his grip for 12 agonizing minutes, but hatred was a powerful fuel. When the crew chief opened the maintenance hatch to check for ice buildup on the hydraulics, Nazari had seized his moment. He had been with them the entire time. "Nobody move." His voice was calm despite his injuries. "The girl and I are leaving. You will land this helicopter and we will disappear. Anyone tries to stop me, she dies." The SEALs froze. 12 of the most dangerous men in the world, and none of them could act. Not with a gun at a child's head. Not with a single twitch of Nazari's finger separating life from death. "Let her go." Thornton's voice was steady, but Kira could see the tension in his shoulders. "This doesn't end well for you either way. Let her go, and we can talk about options." "There are no options. There is only this moment. Land the helicopter." Kira's rifle was still raised, but she had no shot. Nazari was completely shielded behind Layla's small body. The girl's eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her cheeks, but she wasn't struggling. She had learned in her short, terrible life that struggling only made things worse. "Commander," Kira's voice was barely a whisper, "I might have a shot." Thornton's response was immediate. "Negative. You can't risk hitting the girl." "I'm not talking about a headshot. Look at his hand, the one around her throat. He's using a pain compliance hold. If I can hit his wrist, he'll release involuntarily. It's a physiological response. He won't be able to control it." "Sierra 7, give me odds. Can you make that shot?" Kira calculated. Distance was close, less than 10 meters. No wind inside the cargo bay. Stable platform now that the helicopter had leveled off. But the target was tiny. A wrist. Perhaps 8 centimeters of viable impact zone. And if she missed by even a few inches, 60%. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 60% chance of saving the girl. 40% chance of killing her. "Not acceptable." Thornton's voice was firm. "Stand down. We'll find another way." But there was no other way. Kira could see it in Nazari's eyes. This wasn't a man looking for escape. This was a man looking for revenge. He would kill Layla regardless, would kill as many of them as he could before they brought him down. His own death was already accepted. He was simply deciding how many he would take with him. "Commander, he's going to kill her anyway. Look at him. He's not negotiating. He's not planning to survive this. He wants to hurt us, wants us to watch her die." I said, "Stand down, Sierra 7. Nazari smiled, a cold, empty expression that confirmed everything Kira had just said. The little sniper sees clearly. "Yes, Commander. I am going to kill this girl. I am going to put a bullet in her brain while you watch. And then I am going to kill as many of you as I can before you stop me. Because that is what you deserve, all of you, for what your country has done to mine." His finger tightened on the trigger. Time slowed. Kira saw it happening, saw the micro movement in his hand that preceded a trigger pull, saw the tension in his forearm, saw death approaching with the inevitability of sunrise. One final truth, rising from the core of everything her father had taught her. Sometimes the right thing to do is the thing they'll court-martial you for, but you'll be alive to face that court-martial. She fired. The world became a single point of focus. The muzzle flash, the recoil against her shoulder, the bullet traveling 10 meters in a fraction of a second. Impact. Nazari's wrist shattered. Bone fragments and blood sprayed across the cargo bay. His hand opened involuntarily, the pistol tumbling away, his grip on Layla's throat releasing as his nervous system overloaded with pain. The girl dropped. Kira was already firing again. 2 shots. Center mass. Nazari stumbled backward, hit the helicopter's wall, slid down leaving a red smear on the metal. He was still breathing, still conscious. His eyes found Kira's across the cargo bay, and in them she saw something unexpected. Not rage, not hatred, recognition. You, he coughed blood. You are his daughter, the sniper from the hills, the one who killed Alexei. Kira didn't respond, didn't need to. He talked about you, Alexei, before tonight. Said he'd killed your father last Christmas. Said the man died protecting others. Said it was, honorable. Another cough. More blood. Was it worth it? Your father's sacrifice. Did it change anything? Kira thought about the question, really thought about it. It changed me, she said quietly. It made me someone who could save the people he couldn't. Nazari laughed, a wet rattling sound. Then perhaps, we are not so different. Both of us. Made by loss. Made by war. His eyes began to glaze. Tell your commanders. There will be others. Always others. You cannot kill an idea with bullets. No, Kira agreed. But I can protect the people ideas try to destroy. Nazari's head dropped. His breathing stopped. The light faded from his eyes. Karim Nazari, Taliban commander, educated at the London School of Economics, driven to extremism by a drone strike that killed his family, died in an American helicopter on Christmas Eve, killed by a 15-year-old girl he had underestimated. The cargo bay was silent except for the drone of the engines and Layla's quiet sobbing. Then Mercer moved, scooping up the girl, carrying her away from the blood and the body. Donovan kicked Nazari's pistol to the far corner. Parker checked for a pulse that wasn't there, and Thornton walked to where Kira stood, still holding her rifle, still staring at the man she had killed. You disobeyed a direct order. Yes, sir. Took a shot I explicitly told you not to take. Yes, sir. 60% odds. You risked that little girl's life on 60% odds. Yes, sir. Thornton was quiet for a long moment. Then he placed his hand on her shoulder, the same gesture he had used when they first departed the Chinook hours ago. But the weight of it was different now, heavier, more meaningful. You made the right call. You saw what I didn't see, that he was going to kill her no matter what we did, that the only chance was to act. He paused. Your father would have made the same decision, did make the same decision, probably a dozen times in his career. It's what made him who he was. Kira finally looked away from Nazari's body. I was scared when I pulled the trigger. I was terrified I was going to kill her. Good. The day you stop being scared is the day you stop being human. And humanity is what separates us from men like him. Thornton nodded toward the body. Remember that fear. Let it keep you honest. Let it remind you that every shot matters. The helicopter began its final approach to Bagram Airfield. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Christmas morning had arrived. Kira moved to where Mercer sat with Layla. The little girl looked up at her approach, tears still wet on her cheeks, but something else in her eyes now. Something that looked almost like wonder. You saved me, Layla whispered. The first word she had spoken since they found her in that basement cell. The bad man was going to hurt me, and you saved me. Kira knelt down to meet her at eye level. Yes. And I'm going to make sure no one ever hurts you again. Promise? Such a simple word. Such an enormous weight. Promise. Layla reached out and took Kira's hand. Small fingers wrapped around larger ones. A connection forged in blood and fire, and the desperate hope that tomorrow could be better than today. The helicopter touched down. Medical teams rushed forward. The wounded were carried away. Ambassador Harmon was escorted to a waiting vehicle. Statements were taken. Reports were filed. And through it all, Kira stayed with Layla, held her hand, answered her questions, promised her, again and again, that the monsters were gone. Donovan approached as the chaos began to settle. He looked exhausted, his wounded shoulder newly bandaged, but his eyes were clear. Regulations say I can't give you this. He pulled something from his vest. A patch. SEAL Team 7. The one they wore on their right shoulders. The one that marked them as part of the most elite brotherhood in the world. But regulations don't always understand what matters. He pressed the patch into her hand. You earned this tonight. 18 confirmed kills. A counter-sniper engagement at 1,100 meters. and a shot that saved a little girl's life when the rest of us couldn't act." He paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily. "We laughed at you when you boarded that helicopter. Every single one of us. We were wrong. And I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize." "Yeah, I do. Because my daughter's 15, and I spent tonight watching a girl her age do things that would make most operators break." "You deserve respect, Kira. You deserve recognition. And when the time comes, when you're old enough to officially join us, you'll have my recommendation, for whatever that's worth." Other SEALs gathered around. One by one, they offered their acknowledgement. Handshakes, nods, quiet words of respect. The mockery of 12 hours ago had been replaced by something else entirely. Brotherhood. Thornton was last. He stood before her as dawn painted the airfield in golden light, as the chaos of the extraction gave way to the quiet aftermath of survival. "Your father saved my life in Fallujah, 2009, carried me 200 meters under fire with 3 bullets in his vest. I've been carrying that debt for 15 years. He paused. "Tonight, his daughter saved my entire team. The Brennan legacy continues." Kira reached into her pocket and pulled out the mirror. Scratched, dented, stained with sweat and blood and melted snow. She held it up, catching the first rays of Christmas morning sunlight. "He gave me this, told me it could save my life someday. And did it. It helped me kill the man who murdered my father. It helped me deceive him long enough to take the shot." She turned the mirror over in her hands, watching light play across its surface. "But I don't think that's what he meant when he gave it to me. I think he wanted me to see myself, to remember who I am, even when everything else falls apart." "And who are you, Kira Brennan?" She considered the question, thought about everything she had done tonight, everything she had lost, everything she had become. "I'm my father's daughter. I'm someone who protects people. I'm someone who makes the hard shots when no one else can." She slid the mirror back into her pocket. "I'm Sierra 7. Thornton smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since the mission began. "Yes, you are." An hour later, after the debriefs and medical checks and endless questions, Kira found a quiet corner of the base where she could be alone. She sat on a concrete barrier, watching the sun rise over the mountains that had nearly killed them all. Layla found her there. The little girl walked across the tarmac with the uncertain steps of someone learning to trust the world again, a borrowed jacket wrapped around her shoulders, her dark hair tangled from the wind. She sat down beside Kira without saying anything. 2 survivors, 2 orphans, 2 people who understood loss in ways that words couldn't capture. "What happens to me now?" Layla finally asked. "My family's gone. I have no one. You have people who will take care of you, people who will make sure you're safe and educated and given every chance to build a good life. But not you." Kira hesitated. "I have to go back. To America. To training. There are other missions. Other people who need protection. Will you forget me?" The question hit harder than any bullet. Kira turned to face the girl, really face her, seeing in those dark eyes a reflection of herself at that age. Lost, afraid, desperate for someone to promise that the pain would eventually fade. "I will never forget you, and I will come back. Someday when you're older, when things are different, I will find you again." She pulled out the mirror one more time. "My father gave me this. Now I'm giving it to you." Layla took the mirror with trembling hands. "But it's yours. It's all you have left of him." "No. What I have left of him is everything he taught me. The skills, the values, the belief that protecting others is the highest calling anyone can aspire to." Kira closed Layla's fingers around the worn silver surface. "He would want you to have this. He would want it to remind you that even in the darkest moments, there's always light. You just have to look for it." Layla clutched the mirror to her chest, tears streaming down her face. But she was smiling too, a small, fragile expression of hope. "Thank you, Kira, for everything. Thank you for giving me something worth fighting for." They sat together as the sun climbed higher, as Christmas morning unfolded across the war-torn landscape. As the world continued to turn, despite all the violence and loss and grief. 3 years later, Kira would graduate from Georgetown University with a degree in international relations and a classified service record that most operators twice her age couldn't match. 17 missions, 43 confirmed kills, 0 friendly casualties on any operation where she provided overwatch. The myths had begun to spread through special operations communities. Stories of a ghost sniper who appeared in impossible conditions, made impossible shots, and disappeared before anyone could confirm her identity. Some said she was a government experiment. Others claimed she was multiple people using the same call sign. Only a handful knew the truth. On her 18th birthday, an official letter arrived from the Department of Defense. The text was brief but meaningful. Your service to the nation has been exemplary. When you're ready, if you want a place among us, it's yours. We would be honored to have you. It was signed by the commanders of SEAL Team 7, Delta Force, and the CIA Special Activities Division. Kira read the letter in her dorm room, surrounded by the trappings of normal college life. Textbooks and coffee cups, photographs of friends who didn't know what she really did, a laptop displaying a half-finished essay on international diplomacy. In her desk drawer, beneath papers and mementos, lay the seal patch Donovan had given her, and beside it, a photograph that had arrived 6 months ago. A young girl, maybe 13 now, standing in front of a school in Kabul. She was smiling, really smiling, with the kind of joy that came from safety and hope, and the knowledge that the future held possibilities. In her hand, barely visible in the photograph, was a scratched silver mirror. Kira picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. "Sir, this is Sierra 7. I'm ready for full-time duty." On the other end, Commander Jack Thornton's voice carried warmth that had deepened over 3 years of shared missions and mutual respect. "Welcome home, operator. We've been waiting for you." Kira ended the call and looked out her window at the campus below. Students hurried to classes. Professors debated philosophy in nearby buildings. The world carried on, blissfully unaware of the wars being fought in their name, the sacrifices being made in distant mountains and shadowed compounds. She would protect them, all of them. The students and professors and families who would never know her name, the little girls in war-torn countries who dreamed of safety, the operators who trusted her to watch over them from distances they couldn't comprehend. That was her calling, her purpose, her father's legacy, passed down through blood and training and a scratched silver mirror. She was Kira Brennan. She was Sierra 7. And her story was just beginning.